like to invite moderator of this session, Smriti Khanna, Data Privacy Manager, Flipkart. Smriti Sharma, yeah. Data Privacy Manager, Flipkart. Welcome, Smriti. I would like to invite Mr. Kaushik, CEO, Scrut Automation. Welcome, Mr. Kaushik. I'm not the CEO. COO. Mr. Munir Wani, CISO from J&K Bank. Deepshika Mohapatro, Director, Security Governance and ITDR, Providence. And Nikhil Nande, Regional Sales Director, Enterprise Security, HCL Software. Welcome all of you for joining this session. So this session will be based on regulatory activism, stringent obligation and expectations. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible now? Perfect. So, just to reintroduce myself, I'm not Smriti Khanna, I'm Smriti Sharma. And Kirti, you might want to have a cup of coffee to wake yourself up. Okay, so the panel topic is really revolutionary, regulatory activism. You would have heard till date several types of activisms, but this is about the regulators. So just a disclaimers on behalf of myself and my fellow panelists. We love our regulators very much. We don't hate them. It's just that there are some things where we have grievances that we'll be highlighting over here, and what is being talked here stays here. Cool, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for waking up so early, Delhi ki sardi mein, and coming for this morning session. I welcome my fellow panelists for this insightful session, and I request everyone to be awake and feel free to ask us questions, as many as you want. However, to begin with, I will just let you know that this entire panel is a very good combination of healthcare sector, ITES sector, banking sector, BFSI, and compliance automation. So you will hear from us a lot. Digital India के नज़रिए से अगर देखा जाए, तो I'm sure Kush will be having a lot of automation ideas, not just in this room. After this room also, you guys can catch up with him. I hope I have pitched you good. And if you are looking for any new IT solutions, then also you can speak with Nikhil later on. So to start with, Deepshika, we would like to check with you first and initiate this conversation to understand what are the impacts of regulatory activism on industry innovation and growth, wherein on one side government is saying that make in India, innovate in India. They are welcoming all the FDIs. They are welcoming new startup cultures. Um, how do you see this regulations, the new upcoming regulations, also either challenging or being a hurdle to your work?
I think when you look at regulation, there's a reason behind why regulations have been put in place. They could be to address issues, they could be to address concerns, they could be from a growth perspective as well. So if you look at the healthcare sector, um, a couple of years back, and if you talk about how do you handle people's health, the hospital was the core of everything, right? So everybody had to go to a hospital to get their treatments done. Now there's been a change. The patient is in the core of all kinds of innovation. The services are moving to the patients, which also brings in that demand of a lot of regulations to be around to protect the patient data. So I think the regulations go hand in hand. And as long as the industry understands why the regulations have been put in place, and anytime you innovate, when you can go back and bring that aspect of regulation into your account at the very beginning, when you're starting off innovating, there's a huge scope for you to go on the right channel and not get derailed. But if you start looking at saying, oh, I need to innovate, I need to automate everything, I'm going to go ahead and look at to make the best of technology use, and then you say, oh shit, I forgot, there's a regulation that I need to adhere to, then it becomes a problem. But overall, I think in healthcare, there's a huge requirement for HIPAA. Again, as hospitals, because we do a lot of transaction, there's the PCI DSS aspect. So while we keep into account all these things and we build our solutions, I think we are moving in the right path. And coming back to your segment where we say, make in India, we don't deal so much because we are a US-based healthcare hospital chain with the innovation center in India. But yeah, there are certain aspects that also falls into our purview that we have to look in. I don't think they derail us. I think as long as we have a conscious path towards it, it's a steady movement that could happen.
Brilliant, Deepshika. So since you spoke about the Make in India, maybe Kush, I can come to you. Balancing the regulatory compliance with operational efficiency is a delicate task. Could you share your insights on how the organizations can successfully navigate this challenge? Because you are yourself into a startup and a very interesting startup, rather, I would say.
So I will say, if you even talk about OECD, their main motto was there that fostering the regulatory environment which is very conducive for SMEs to grow was their motto since the beginning. And regulation is very important for all the sectors, whether it's fintech, healthcare. There are many situations where organizations can land into, for example, in fintech or banking compliance. If you're not following the regulatory compliances, you can have a bank run, right? So if you're following the regulations, you would avoid situations like a bank run or situations wherein there's not a healthy competition, right? So an organization which is not following regulations might land into an unhealthy competition and situation. So if you, and also having regulations can help you on saving fines, on not having breaches, making sure that the recognition or the face value of the organization is maintained. So it is very important for organizations to make sure that all of them follow the regulations. And these days, our economies and sectors are not limited to India or to a particular country. We are very interconnected with the innovation of the internet. And for having a healthy practice across the globe, it is very important to have the regulations which are there in place. For example, I'll not take a lot of time here, but you can see any of the privacy laws, whether it's GDPR, whether it's PDPA, whether it is our new DPDP Act of India, the main backbone framework of these regulations are very common. So that is where the organizations sometimes have to follow all the regulations together. If I'm working in EU, US, India, I would have 3 data privacy regulations. So here, there is always a chance that the automation of the regulatory compliances comes into picture and is very important.
I think.
So, since Kush, you already touched upon the another heavily regulated sector, the BFSI. So maybe Munir, now I can come to you. Could you provide us some examples of successful strategies that companies have employed in your past experience or in your current experience to meet the stringent regulatory expectations without compromising on the competitions?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think now people have come in. So, I would say, as you are aware that BFSI is very highly regulated organization. The banking, it's a very highly regulated sector. And if we talk about the success of any of the organization, basically hinges upon three important parameters, which we usually say very strong governance, effective risk management, and very, I would say, continuous compliance culture. These are the three important facets of every organization. For the success of every organization, these are the baseline parameters which have to be in place. With respect to the compliance, ensuring compliance culture would not only mean enforcement of regulatory guidelines and directions, but what we all basically are talking about is ensuring that we adhere to the policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, laws, statutes issued on time-to-time basis. That's what the compliance would mean. And in BFSI, we say there is a known study in BFSI which talks about it usually takes 2.4 times more cost to ensure compliance if we do not do the compliance on time. It would say the cost of non-compliance is 2.4 times more than the cost of compliance. So invariably we have to be compliant. And to be very honest, nobody from us, whether it is from BFSI, it's from healthcare, it is hospitality, it is ITES, it is any of the industry, nobody would want to be on the wrong side of what we call is laws and statutes. So we need to comply. With respect to the compliance in BFSI, I would rather say, yes, it has been both the boon as well as the bane. The boon in terms of today, we see what has been happening across banking industry across globe. Last year, I'm sure you must be knowing that last year there have been 3 banks outside India which went to the bank run state because there was no supervisory control or no supervisory oversight on those banks. And then they just went off, destabilizing everything around them. And thankfully in India, I would say BFSI, when we talk to our peers in outside India, what we have observed is thanks to Reserve Bank of India, thanks to many of the regulations which have come from RBI, we see a comprehensive framework of regulations being imposed on Indian banking industry, by virtue of which the stability of the Indian economy, the backbone of our entire financial system, it has ensured that stability remains. And the key takeaways, as you said, what are the strategies for this? I would say very simple, very basic things, I would say, are to be adopted. We have been adopting many of the frameworks. I would say every organization needs to adopt the compliance framework. That is the baseline. Once the strong compliance framework in terms of assessment, in terms of remediation, in terms of enforcement is applied, you need to see that now that you have this framework, how do you enforce this framework? And there you need to talk about a RegTech kind of solution, which I'm sure Kush will talk in detail. You need to have in place a regulatory technology which will actually facilitate you to get the regulations. And once you have all the regulations on a platter, it will dissect these regulations, it will ingest those regulations, it will help you to actually send these regulations to the operating teams and then collect the artifacts or the compliances against them. So that's the second thing. Third important thing I would say is ensure, means the way we talk about means we get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we do a basic hygiene. So we need to ensure that compliance has to be inculcated within our culture as an activity of basic hygiene. We cannot do away with that. And believe me, once we just do these basic things in terms of ensuring we are complied with our policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, very small steps we take, it will go long way in ensuring that your compliance fabric is strong, and which will pave way for you to effectively deliver and go to the market with umpteen agileness and umpteen strength. And this is what my point would be.
Sure. Thank you, Munir, for bringing in the perspective from the strategic aspect. While we are talking a lot about the Indian diaspora, how things are being handled in Indian regulatory environment, Nikhil, how about you familiarize us with the global trends, how the regulatory activism is being observed and handled at the global scale? Because you come from a global organization which is operating in, I think, almost every region, every country, and there has been a drastic change in the regulatory frameworks in other countries as well, including Europe being the most talked about. US is also having a lot of new regulations coming in, not just from the privacy perspective, but also from the security perspective. NIST has also come up with a lot of new frameworks. ISO has also come up with the latest framework on AI technologies as well. So how do you see the regulatory activism taking shape in the global environment?
Good morning. Thank you. So the way we look at it, right, with my experience and with my clientele, now when we look at the frameworks, right, and my fellow panelist has been speaking about the framework and the regulatory aspects of it and the guidelines that are taking in place. You spoke about Europe, right, the GDPR guideline. I mean, there are multiple such guidelines coming in place. If you look at the world, the way the business is happening today, it's shrinking. I mean, the world is really shrinking. The way we interact with other global organizations and our own presence, you know, any company which is the Indian or any company which is an MNC, you know, their presence in our country and our presence in other regions of the world, the way it is happening is that the whole world is shrinking. The technology is bringing things closer and trying to build a platform, a very similar platform where we can cater to these frameworks and requirements. So the ease of business is where these things play a role. Now, what is also happening is that you look at the businesses, then you look at the regulators and the platforms who prepare this framework, and the other part is the OEMs who provide the solution in that aspect of it. If you look at us as a global solution provider or a product solutions, the way we are designing is that we are proactively working with the regulators to understand what is coming forth and taking in the norms with other organizations and the global community and aligning our solutions to that aspect of it. Now, if you look at the key part of it, where, I think the main aspect and focus from a customer perspective, look at it, they need to be very proactive when it comes to handling the regulators and the requirements. That proactiveness needs to come from within the organization and different BUs. You talk about finance, you talk about operations, or you talk about the IT, or you talk about the security. They need to gel, make a very strong, stringent framework internally, and then collaborate proactively and reactively with the regulators. That will help them. So take a step forward, work with them, see what is coming. The OEMs, the solution providers are very much in line with that. If we talk about RBI guidelines, we as an organization are very proactively working with what norms are coming up and how we can help organizations. So that is something that plays a very, very key role, I suppose. So working as one unit will certainly help in that aspect.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, for bringing this point forward. And now let's take a different viewpoint from you, Deepshika. Deepshika, you have worked with different sectors. I remember you were mentioning that you have also worked in the IT sector while you were with IBM. Then you went to IKEA, and now you are in the heavily regulated sector of healthcare, Providence. So in this entire journey, What are the common challenges that you have observed in the businesses, and what do you see as I would say, good part of these regulations that are so stringent and that the panel has been termed as regulatory activism?
Yeah, I think when you work in different sectors, you get a viewpoint of how things are within each of the sector. But in the crux of it, if you go to the core, what are these frameworks around? These are around cybersecurity protection. These are around privacy. These are about protecting either your patient data or your customer data. So at the crux, they are the same thing. But it has evolved over time, or segment to segment is treating it differently. I think one of the things that remains the core is that it's not something that can be done by one division or a compliance team, how you're rolling it out. It rather becomes a function that has to be worked across the organization. So when you build and you work on any framework, be it any industry, getting that entire organization participation becomes very important. The other aspect is understanding the framework from a geolocation perspective. Because a lot of these frameworks, and even if you take GDPR, and a lot of us must have implemented GDPR changes from location to location. So there are some things about GDPR that are very fundamental. But then you go to Germany, there are certain different aspects that come into play. You enter into Czech Republic, and then the camera controls become a little different of how you manage it. So those are the elements of frameworks that differ. And as any sector, if you understand it early and you work around it, it becomes easy. If not, yeah, the challenge remains, right? And I think, again, going back to your question where it's like, how is it different across industry? I think at the end, the amount of data that you're working with brings out the complexity for you to handle. So how do you manage that data element? How do you build the controls around it becomes something that is important. I know being healthcare, being regulated, we have to go through those compliances on a regular basis. We have to go back to the regulatory authorities and keep reporting on them. So that's a day in, day out activity that has now become. The moment something new changes, and if there's not much implementation time, that becomes a challenge to handle. But overall, I think it's become something that all of us are now tuned to manage and handle.
Perfect. So the minute you said Germany, you actually touched the pain point that I had while working with one of my previous employers. I remember dealing with the works councils in Germany, and they are the toughest ones. They really don't want you to interfere in the work at all. I'm sure a few people over here are also dealing with the works council on a daily basis, and they know where I'm coming from. Coming back to the panel topic, Munir, there has been a key word that has been coming up in everyone's conversation, not just for this panel, but in other panels as well that and I'm sure the other audience members have also heard, is collaboration. Right. So could you elaborate on the role that collaboration between businesses and regulatory bodies plays in fostering a constructive regulatory environment? And maybe once Munir is done, Kush, you can share your insights as an external partner or consultant here, maybe after Munir.
Okay. From BFSA perspective, I would say that banks have been at the forefront of technology adoption, and we have seen multiple digital transformations starting from the time of liberalization, wherein the automation of the bank started from manual banking to what we usually call is partial banking automation, where the front office of the banks was automated. And then from partial banking to total banking automation, wherein again we said, okay, now entire branches should be automated. And from total branch automation to anywhere banking, wherein the customer of the branch was not the customer of the bank was not the customer localized to the branch, but it was able to transact anywhere. And then over a period of time, we saw the stage wherein the centralization happened based on the business decisions in terms of recovery point objective and recovery time objectives. We consolidated our DCs and DRs, and then internet started opening up. We went open to the internet, and we started doing mobile banking, e-bank, many other things, correct? Over this entire period of time, what we have seen is this entire thing was driven by regulations, means one regulation over another regulation over another regulations, which the banks were complied. But then the beauty of the BFSI environment has been, which I would again give credit to Indian Banking Association and Reserve Bank of India, has been a collaborative approach between the banks and the regulator itself. And what does that collaboration mean? It would effectively mean that once the major master direction of Reserve Bank of India came, it was 29th of April 2011, I remember it. It is the master direction is usually known as Gopal Krishnan Committee report, which came into the banks in 29th April 2011. But that entire circular, which was crafted by Reserve Bank of India by virtue of putting up a panel, wherein the members of that panel invariably were from Institute of Development and Research in Banking Technology, which consists of majorly the banks. So it was banks who proposed something. It was banks which was who crafted that entire document and gave it to Reserve Bank of India. And Reserve Bank of India, by virtue of the powers invested by Ministry of Finance to them, they issued that circular. And that collaborative approach, what it did was, it helped the banks to deploy those kind of process-based controls, technology controls, and ensure compliance to those guidelines immediately after it was issued. Of late, we have seen another thing. For example, we have been talking about DPDP recently. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act is now in force, probably being notified clause by clause in next 4 or 5 months. It will be in practice now. What we have seen is, by virtue of this collaborative effort between the banks and the regulator made it sure that these banks are positioned well for this act way before this was even passed in the parliament. There has been a master direction from Reserve Bank of India, which is 18th February 2021, if I'm not wrong, which says master direction on digital payment security controls, which talks in detail about informed consent, which talks in detail about customer grievance management, which talks in detail about anonymization of data. And all those contours of DPDP have actually been put in place by the regulator in 2021 itself by way of the direction and by way of a consultative approach between the banks and the regulator. So I would say, yes, it's very important. Unless the regulators and the specific industry talks to each other, what would happen is there might be certain regulation which will come into force, and once it is in force, probably it would not be implemented on ground. So effectively, it will nullify everything which is being actually conceived of. So that's very important.
Right, and that's a very valid point, Munir, that you brought up, that the banks collaborated and they came up with the regulations and the guidelines to let the people know that, the regulators know that this is what is going to make our work easy, and that's how we can have a good regulation. This actually reminds me of the Senator hearing of Sam Altman, where he and the chief privacy officer for IBM, and there was one professor as well, one academician as well. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. They all went to the senators in the US and requested for regulations around AI and the LLMs. So that's if you guys have not heard about it or seen that interview, please see that. It's almost a 2 hours hearing, and it's a very interesting and insightful hearing that you will hear. So coming to you, Kush, maybe you can share your viewpoints as an external partner on this aspect.
Hello, yeah. So Munir actually talked all about the collaboration between banks and regulator. It has been going good, but there have been instances wherein the regulation was not done collaboratively, and it created a lot of confusions in the market. So if you remember, on 28th of April, since you're taking dates, I'll also take dates. 28th of April 2022, CERTIN came up with with 5-6 guidelines which all organizations in India are supposed to follow. Of them, one was all the servers have to be synchronized with NIC server. And so it was just released. I don't know from where did that collaboration happen, but do you think that's practical? Absolutely not. And even today, that circular is lying there, but there's no penalty if you're not even synchronizing. And another thing which they brought in is informing the certain within 6 hours of the breach. That is again a less time. So there has to be. So my viewpoint is there should be collaboration with the industry and the regulator. The final decision is of the regulator. With the industry, it should happen. Now with DPDP Act, I still remember when it came as a draft, it was quite long, lengthy, lot of more requirements, and government this time, before releasing this act, they actually did a lot of market survey, a lot of insights were taken from industry experts, and our DPDP Act, I would say, is the practical privacy act, not that lengthy, and it is all because of these collaborative efforts that the India's Privacy Act is more practical than any other GDPR, which is very lengthy, lot of compliances, and end of the day, the what you achieve for privacy is similar in DPDP and GDPR. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kush. Nikhil, maybe now I can come to you back again, and maybe you can share with us some of your practical insights about how the businesses should structure their operations to effectively handle the regulatory communications in today's world.
We've been talking a lot about regulatory and the frameworks and how the regulators have been putting up norms, and the industry is probably struggling to comply to those things. Even in today's age, I look at a lot of the leading banking or the financial or the insurance segment where the leadership are coming to the OEMs, somebody like us who provide solutions, saying that, oh, I have audit lined up, and we are struggling with this particular thing. Now, in my earlier discussion, in my earlier response, I spoke about something like proactiveness. If I had to go a little back from today's world, maybe more than a decade back, during my IBM days, now banking had come up with, for the the cluster and non-cluster environment, it kind of created a havoc. How do we really handle that? All of a sudden, there is a requirement. But if you look at it in complying with the regulators, working with the industry, the solution providers, that fell in place. Regulators will come up with norms, and it is going to be a continuous process. It's something not going to stop for whatever reasons. Now, the way I look at it is there essentially has to be a very internal and external coordination that has to happen for things to work smoothly, not create any havoc, and us to stay compliant on that aspect of it. That necessarily calls for a complete teaming up when it comes to the be it any vertical, from a regulation perspective. It may not be BFSI or pharma or any other segment, because I cater to so many verticals there. It may not be specific, but take a BFSI segment, because we are largely talking from that perspective, or even from her perspective of the healthcare. You talk about those verticals, you talk about the regulators' respective that are verticals, and you talk about the industry who provides the solution in that aspect. When you team up, when you gel up, and you understand that requirements, I think that is the key essential part of it, where you can actually have a lined up approach and deliver and address the norms. See, if we look at why the regulations are there, nobody wants to get breached. I mean, 2022 has been a year where a lot of breaches have been happening. Ransomwares have happened, companies have been taken at stake. I have a customer who was under the ransom attack for 45 days. Look at the loss, look at the situation they've been. And we've been helping them day in, day out, and they've been on fire. And likewise, there have been so many customers. So, and then this continues. How do you address those breaches, those attacks? How do you stay safe? Where are the requirements? Data is a concern, right? If you look at that broad aspect of it, fine. It's the way you look at it, right? I look at it from a regulatory perspective because I handle the customers also. We've been proactively working with the regulators also. So we understand where this comes from. I think to unite and address this and be open about it would probably help and make us grow further.
Thank you, Nikhil. Before I move to the next question for my panelist, I have a question for the audience, considering there is a good count now. Do you guys think that if there is a set draft for doing the regulatory communications, for example, for incident reporting or for any kind of grievance reporting, do you think a set draft will save a lot of time and make the communication more efficient? Yes, no, maybe. Yes? Cool. Is there someone from DSCI here? Yeah, so maybe you guys can take this word to your post AISS discussions that there was one point that we need drafts for all the communications. Cool, thank you. So I think, Munir, I'll come back to you now. Anticipating and preparing for future regulatory changes is really crucial. I mean, even though we have the DPDPA already out, but we are still waiting for the rules. And there have been so many statements in the press that why do you need 2 years or 18 months for implementation? Why can't you, implement the new law within 2 months, 6 months, 3 months? Lot of stipulation is going on. So what strategies can companies employ proactively to navigate and adapt to evolving regulatory landscape? And I'm not just talking about the DPDPA over here. Maybe there have been a lot of RBI requirements as well, like data localizations and all. There was tokenization requirements. So not just from the DPDPA perspective, maybe you can let us know from the InfoSec, BFSI and other sectors as well.
From technology standpoint, I would say it would be very important. Means if we see all these regulations, whether we talk about digital payment security directions from Reserve Bank of India, whether we talk about Reserve Bank of India 2nd June 2016 circular about cybersecurity framework in banks, which has now been reframed and reissued by SEBI and IRDIA as well, or by NABARD as well for regional rural banks. And if we see for other guidelines, for example, I was talking about 29th April 2011 guidelines, which spoke about business continuity, disaster recovery management, and many other facets of technology, which has now been rephrased again by 7th November 2023 circular. I think some 1 month back there has been another circular which talks about IT governance framework, which has again been repackaged. I would say, what does these all regulations talk about? They talk about putting in place an effective baseline security framework in place. Again, I'm going to the same basic point. If we just follow one of the industry standards, I'm not advocating any specific standard, whether you like ISO 27001 2013 or ISO 27001 2022 or NIST framework, or you talk about MITRE framework, or you talk about Center for Internet Security framework. So once you focus on one baseline security framework, ensure that all the things are deployed the way they are objectively designed to deploy. It should not be a tick in the box. I have seen, I'm coming from the bank which has a legacy of 80 years, 85 years, wherein we have seen probably the compliance has more or less been a tick in the box. Okay, we want to show the regulator that we are maintaining the asset registry, put 20 assets on a registry and show it to themselves, we have this registry. But believe me, we are not befooling the regulator, or we are befooling our own selves, because eventually, if we just put these things in perspective, if we just ensure the basic hygiene and baseline security controls are in place, we will be much ahead of the curve, and it would invariably, what would happen is, once any of the regulation and the compliance comes in, you would either yourself see that yes, you are already complied, or you will say, okay, you are complied 90%, probably we have to do 10% of work, which you can do and move further ahead on it.
Sure. Thank you, Munir. Kush, now that we have been talking about regulators a lot, let's talk about business. Your business, automation of compliances business. Very important, see? Because the government is also asking us to automate things, get digitalized. So when you see such regulatory changes and such short timelines for implementation, what are the unintentional hindering moments that you have faced? And if you can probably share some business cases or some examples where you have found challenges in automation just because of this short timelines of implementation.
So I'll tell you, Munir has been talking about so many directions. It might be confusing for you guys early in the morning, right? He talked about so many framework, 27,001 RBI frameworks starting from 2011. Now, if okay, so Munir is heading the information security for J&K Bank, quite established, would have a good compliance team. Talk about an organization which are the fintechs these days, right? The basic fundamental, or if you see the fintech organizations who are young fintechs, they would have got a very lean team. Fine. Now, for them, compliance, maintaining compliance is important. They are directly uh, having connect with the bank, and for fintech, compliance is equally important as a bank, but they don't have a very good compliance team. And you talk to them that now so if they are into prepayment instrument, they would have to go for SAR data localization, SAR PPI, SAR tokenization, all those master guidelines, and on top of that, ISO 27001. So having a very lean team, you see a lot of small organizations, they put their CTO, who is responsible for security, or someone COO. And if you see their risk assessment, it is not done collaboratively within the organization. It is just an Excel, a copy-paste Excel, which is lying in the laptop, which they bring up during the audit, but it is not done collaboratively. If you don't know your risks, how will you maintain your information security? You need to know your risk. And for all these frameworks, the automation part, the compliance automation part becomes very important. Why? Because if you see, access control is one requirement which is common in all the framework, but there might be something which is different in tokenization audit, which would be different in a PPI audit. So having automation is very important so that you maintain your compliance collaboratively within the organization and have the correct compliance. So it's actually the demand of the day, which I've seen. I've been into InfoSec for more than 15, 16 years and have been into automation, compliance automation for last 2 years, and I see my clients actually deriving the benefit out of that.
Cool. Stay on. Um, I have already got a trigger from Ankit and Kirti there that you are almost on time, and they have been showing me the timer as well. So before I open the floor for the audience to ask any questions, maybe we can have one last question for all the panelists. So as a closing note, maybe you can share your experiences with the regulatory directions and the reducing reporting timeline dealing. I remember, this is something that I will say, Kush, you love the Friday fever mode, and we are just 24 hours away, not even 24 hours, I think 12 hours, 11, 12, 13 hours away from the Friday fever to begin. So wow, how you have been dealing with the Friday fever moments?
I generally speak in conferences about Friday fever. So the way we have movie releases on Friday, you will see all new frameworks of RBI, they get released on Friday. And the CISO is now spending his Saturday, Sunday understanding what to do.
And not to forget, our hackers are also
Yes,
notorious. They
yes.
love Friday evenings.
They do everything on Friday. So if you have a compliance automation software, as soon as the new compliance requirement comes, it will start showing in your dashboard. So it will start showing you these are the new things which have come up. For example, there's so many people here. How many of you know that whether your organization is an SDF or not? Significant data fiduciary. So till now, even government has not released that list. But I know banks will be SDF, insurance company will be SDF. But until unless I don't know whether I am an SDF or not, how do I make sure I go for those compliances? So with automation, I don't have to worry. It will start showing me what are the requirements as and when it comes. I'll not
Cool.
waste.
Thank you, Kush. Over to you, Munir. Same question, your viewpoint on dealing with the stringent timelines and the regulatory compliances.
I would again say we have been luckiest among the lot. I recall that in 2016, Reserve Bank of India actually decided that whatever incidents are happening in BFSI vertical are to be reported to CSIT, which is Cybersecurity Information Technology Unit of Reserve Bank of India, as well as to CERTIN. Within 1 day, and then they ask the banks to keep in place. It's again, I'm telling you, if you just focus on cybersecurity framework, irrespective of what framework you do, there's an incident response management. We talk about 4 core elements of information and cybersecurity. We talk about risk assessment, information security risk assessment. We talk about incident management and response. We talk about change management, and we talk about vulnerability and patch management. These are the 4 cornerstones of cybersecurity. And when we talk about these 4 cornerstones of cybersecurity, the first one is incident management. And incident management, you need to have in place, I would say, major incident response plan or a cyber crisis management plan. And in cyber crisis management plan, you need to have the draft. You were talking about whether the regulators, or you asked them if DSCI can take it up with internally in terms of having those draft plans. So for example, in the banks, there is a cybersecurity management plan which invariably covers one draft document which says in what format you have to submit this report to Reserve Bank of India, to CERTIN, and if you are regulated by NCIIPC as well. So, for example, we being in a public sector bank are as well being governed by NCIIPC. So, any incident happens in my organization is to be reported to these 3 organizations in the same format and in a time period of 6 hours. And it is only reporting. It is not like they will start asking questions, why this happened, give us the RCA. No. Let us be very clear. It's only reporting. But I would want the regulators to move one step ahead. What my personal experience says that whenever we even report the incident to CERTIN or to them, we would expect some kind of hand-holding from them rather than means taking the incident and saying, okay, you have reported, it is enough for us. No, some kind of hand-holding has to be from there.
True that. And I think everyone over here will also agree that while the regulators are issuing some kind of drafts or templates for the reporting or communication perspective, there has to be a synchronization in those templates, whether it is to a particular organization like CERTIN or to sectoral reporting regulators. So that kind of synchronization is also required. Over to you, Nikhil. Same question, your perspective from your current role or your previous experiences perspective.
Thanks. I'll rather keep it very short. Just a couple of points from my side. The way I look at from where we are and my position, I see both the sides. I see the customer angle of it, and I see the regulator's angle of it also. And I really buy the point what Munir said about the handholding part of it, right? You have a framework, you have a regulations. From a customer perspective, if there is a report that has been presented, there has to be a handholding. We as a solution provider, we help with that aspect. From a regulatory perspective, I would tell the customer segment, the vertical segment, to look at the aspect why those are in place. If we have that aspect and a very transparent, look at each that part of it, I think we'll be helping each other to stay further, more secure in that manner.
I know the clock is ticking, so I'll also keep it very short. When you fall under multiple regulatory requirements because of the nature of business that you do, have an integrated control framework. That is very, very essential. So if you come under NIST as your framework, you come under HIPAA, PCI DSS, and not to throw acronyms, if you have a federal contract, there are much more regulations that come into play. So when you have multiple such regulations to adhere to, have a very integrated control and then do that control monitoring, because that will show you your compliance areas, that will show you where you're non-compliant, and then the reporting timelines, I know in certain areas is stringent, certain areas you can have discussions with your regulatory bodies to go back and report them saying that, there's been a breach, either on my end or a third party or a fourth party. But I think it has to be a two-way communication for the betterment of the industry. So with that, I'm going to conclude and over to you.
Thank you, Deepshika. Panelists, you guys have been really wonderful, but the DSCI team has been really kind to me, and they have agreed for one audience question. So anyone has any question for the panelists? If you guys don't have any questions, then the DSCI people will be happy. Oh yeah, there is a lady who has a question. Can someone pass on a mic, please? Please introduce yourself before asking the question, and if the question is very specific to someone, just point it towards the respective panelist.
Sure, I'll keep it short because I think all the eyes will be on me to move to the other sessions. So, yeah, I'm Soumya. I am from Providence. I have a question specifically for Kush because we were talking about, like, there are a lot of buzzwords and a lot of sessions that we have been attending about, as you mentioned, on AI, LLM, and other things. So, I wanted to know if you talk about automation in terms of regulation, do you really think that, like, all of it can be automated and the human element will go away, or are there specific facets which will still hold value when it comes to human intervention on the regulations?
Yeah, that's true. Not 100% compliance can be automated. So when you talk about compliance automation, what we have, or a lot of compliance automation solutions have, is they have a unified control framework which actually maps to various frameworks. So you come to know if my controls related to change management and access control, if I have followed and it's implemented, I don't have to do it again and again for all the framework. But yes, 100% compliance automation cannot happen. There will be a human element. We would have a CISO or so the compliance automation solution will help you in having a lean compliance team and not a very heavy compliance team. But yes, 100% is not possible. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you, DSCI, for giving us an opportunity to interact with the lovely audience.
Thank you.
The panel member to stay for a minute. So Kirti, she's an alumni of the DSCI Microsoft Cyber Shiksha. She will be presenting you with the memento for joining us for this wonderful session. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us.